Hello, everyone. Hi. Oh, we've got more coming. Good stuff.
Hello.
Hey, Bob.
Hi.
Hi. Hi, Hedi. Hi, everyone.
Hello. I'm Carol from Santa Monica. Hi. It's early. Just got my coffee. Good
Wow, it's
morning.
pretty early. It's 7 a.m. in Santa Monica right now, isn't it?
It is.
Wow.
It is.
Well, thank you
Anyway,
for joining
thank you.
us.
Thank you.
So, hi, everybody. This is weird. I mean, that's the first time I'm not the host. But
I'm the host.
Yeah, I trust that my host will take very good care of me.
Of course.
My guests.
Of course. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the March 17th. I think it must be the fourth event in the AUD Literature Festival, Indelible Literature Festival. Still letting a few people in, but I mean, we're going to start in about 2 or 3 minutes, if you don't mind, everyone. And after my introduction, it'll be Rula giving a reading and talking about her recent work, and then it will be followed by questions and answers. But let me just see if anyone else is waiting so I can let them in. Good. Hope everyone's ready for a wonderful hour and a bit of poetry and discussion surrounding poetry in the pandemic. Okay, good. So I think, right. Shall we start, do you think? I don't believe anyone else is waiting in the waiting room for me, which is good. Yeah, good. Right, everyone.
Let's do this.
A very warm welcome to Simply Being Poetry and the Pandemic. This is an event where Dr. Roula-Maria Dib, my colleague and friend at AUD, professor at AUD, will be reading and talking about her latest book, Simply Being, a collection of poetry, in relationship to poetry and the pandemic. I would like quickly, if you don't mind, to read a quick introduction to Rula. She gained her PhD from Leeds University, and she's both a creative writer and a literary scholar. And we'll see actually that in this book they both combine. Currently, she is a professor at of English at the American University in Dubai here, and she's editor-in-chief of Indelible, the university's first and quite flourishing literary journal. Her poems, essays, and articles have appeared in several journals. Her new book, Jungian Metaphor in Modernist Literature, was published with Routledge in March 2020. She is a member of the Poetry Society, a member of the International Association for Jungian Studies, the Jungian Society for Scholarly Studies, and the British Association for Modernist Studies. The themes that pervade her work usually revolve around different aspects of human nature, ekphrasis, surrealism, and mythology. And before I just mention a few other things, I wanted to say that Rula is this whole festival is the brainchild and graft child of Rula's hard industry and inspiration. So the fact that we're all here together is partly her responsibility and her gift to us. So I think we should all be very grateful for that. So today I believe she'll be reading and talking and reading rather. A context, a relationship to poetry and her poetry in the pandemic, and text from the book itself, which is titled, as it is here, Simply Being. It's a wonderful book. I was able to write an introduction to it, so I enjoyed it immensely at a personal level, but also at a professional level. And often enough, you'll see that her intellectual and academic interests feed into her very individual still poetry. So I'm going to leave the floor to Rula. And any questions that come up along the way, I think we're going to wait till the end, I believe, right, Rula? We want to wait till the end,
Yeah,
I think.
preferably. Right.
Okay, good. So, Dr. Roula-Maria Dib.
Just Rula is fine.
Okay.
Thank you so much, Omar, for this wonderful and elegant introduction. I was very humbled by everything you said, especially coming from someone like you, from such a prolific, well-established poet, someone we all love. So, and thank you again so much for this wonderful introduction in the new book. I also want to thank all my other endorsers who wrote beautiful blurbs. Chris Murray, who is with us today, joining us from Ireland. Lorette Luzajic, who is joining us from Canada. And Selma Caller, who unfortunately wasn't able to join us today, but I really want to thank everyone who contributed to the coming out of this book and everything else that you did for me. So whether it was interviews, posts, thank you so much. And it's wonderful to be here with so many people that I love, so many people that I would like to meet one day. I see friends, I see students, I see previous students, I see colleagues, I see siblings. My brother's here, so hi. Happy St. Patrick's Day. My brother, Samuel Patrick, is here with us today. Thank you so much. I hope I don't bore everybody to death. So I'll try to keep it to a minimum. I'll try to not talk more than I should. So please tell me when to stop. And as Dr. Sabah said, you may leave your questions in the box below. You may also choose to use the microphone, but before you do that, you can just press the hand reaction so that we'll know that somebody has a question. So once again, thank you, Dr. Sabah, and everybody else for being here. Okay, so the past year wasn't easy for anyone, and so many things happened, good things, bad things, tragic things. It's just that we weren't there for each other physically the way that we should have, but we were all there for each other one way or the other. I noticed that there were so many, there was a lot of toxic narration on the news, there was a lot of confusion, there was a lot of uncertainty. And one of the terms that was commonly used that I didn't really like was the term social distancing. I prefer the term physical distancing because this pandemic actually showed who was there for who. And although we couldn't be physically with each other because of the obvious physical distancing, there was a lot of connection. I made some wonderful friends, many of who are here today, through Indelible, and this is because it came through poetry. So the pandemic did have a huge impact on poets because there was so much to respond to. At the end of the day, poetry is a dialogue with the world. It's not just a dialogue with yourself, with your emotions, but it's a dialogue that tells us what's going on. It's a dialogue that helps us understand what is going on and where we are, our place in the world today. So this impact of poetry on my life caused me to finally write some poems and compile them in a book. Now, not everything in the book is newly composed, but most of it is. There are some poems that I chose that I've written a long time ago, but that I found to be, to match the theme of simply being. So what does it mean to simply be? It just means that we are everything that we are. We are so many different roles. We are so many different people, so many different voices. And I thought that this archetypal manifestation of our being could be put in several poems with different voices and different themes in one book. So I'll start by talking a little bit about, again, about what I think of the pandemic's effect on poetry, not just because it caused me to write the book, but it also was the impetus behind so many poems flooding into Indelible. So in this unprecedented time of global crisis, as we all know, with all of its nebulousness and vibes of uncertainty that we just spoke about, its bleakness, it has also proven to be vital for creativity. So ask anyone. Yesterday, for example, we had Dr. Leslie Gardner with us, who is a literary agent, and she said that there has been an unbelievable amount of manuscripts handed over to her during the pandemic. So it can be a time to use imagination in a way that people might not otherwise have done. It's a time to explore, to be receptive to the inner world and its rising images, that surface softly into the unconscious world, like bubbles waiting to be captured in painting, drawing, and writing. So imagination at this time is eager for embodiment, for existence in the empirical dimension, while being crafted into reality in any way that creativity may allow. In my case, it was writing and, well, cooking. For those who know that I love to cook, it was, yeah, I was experimenting a lot during this time. So this is a period that will most probably not recur during a lifetime. I'm not saying that it's an all good period, or it's you know, it's something that poets are being opportunistic, but it actually did give us a lot of time to write. Maybe we weren't always in the mood to write because of so many things that happened, but at the same time, when it's poetry, it's different, because when it's poetry, it's the emotions, the intensity of emotions that actually moves us. So, and they're not always happy emotions. We have different emotions that make us react to the world around us today. So the thing about poetry and the pandemic is that poetry does not merely express our feelings. So it does, that's part of it, but it also has other functions, like bringing people together. Sometimes we connect with one another through poems, not only through sharing poetry, but also through writing poems, through reflecting on other people that have an impact on our lives. One thing that happened right before the start of writing the book, exactly a year ago, my grandmother passed away, and I wasn't able to attend her funeral because of, obviously, there was a lockdown that had just started. So it was a healing process. My grandmother died at a ripe old age. She was 102 years old. She had a wonderful long life, and it's not that we didn't see it coming, but it's difficult to not be with the people that you love when they leave this world. Writing poetry did help me to connect with my memories and with, you know, to get more in touch with the positive feelings that she left in me. Okay, so I'm going to start by reading something. Without further ado, because I think I spoke so much, I'm going to read a poem called Lavenders, which was also published before in Chris Murray's journal, Poethead. So for those of you who have the book, it's on page 23. Lavenders refers to the flowers, obviously, but also to the color, to the lavender color that has often been associated with many spiritual experiences. Priests wear purple. You know, it's a spiritual color. Even in the Ayurveda and in other different color therapies, purple is a very important color. It's the color of the spirit. And this was based on a memory. And well, we were visiting, it was a memory in Lebanon, also my home country that I haven't been to in almost 2 years right now. We were going to visit a sacred place, a shrine, and we passed by a field of lavenders. And the image of lavenders, because they're so beautiful and because you tie them with spiritual experiences such as visiting a shrine, they stick with you. These are the types of images and memories that you go to for solace during times of lockdown. With the night hushing irises away, lavenders call at the break of dawn, waving purple corollas at the vigilant apertures. From a provincial path and beyond the hinterland of memory, the healing embrace of a once stranger dwelling in my heart thaws the ice-patched knees of my soul. Defrosted, touched by frankincensuality, I wonder at the sight of embossoming blossoms. Inesthesis, inhaling the sweetness of the vision. For a moment I am alive, awake, and here, in synchronicity with an eternal dawn. This moment is now, tomorrow, and forever. It is you again visiting, as ever, knocking at my dream doors, gently caressing faith with lavandula petals. This visit I shall return willingly, though unknowingly, when amethyst bushes lead the way once again. Miraculously, like a butterfly to a tea rose, I find myself on that much-trodden path, through the heart of an ever open door. And I kneel drunk with love, lavender and light. So this is, it was actually written before the pandemic, but the poem was one of the poems that I always went to because of the images that I was revisiting during the times of nostalgia and homesickness that I'm sure everybody had a share of during this time. So one thing about the pandemic and poetry during the pandemic is that it reminds me a little bit about of the modernist period. So I'm a modernist. My field of study is literary modernism. And I realized that what we are going through now is pretty similar to the 1920s. So in the year 2020, it's worth talking about the effects of the pandemic and comparing it to the year 1920 or the 10 years that came afterwards, especially if you look at it from the perspective of a poet. The way poetry lately seems to be drawing people together reminds me of modernist poets and the conglomerations that occurred during that time of global crisis. Poets met, they got to know each other through means of their art. We had movements in poetry such as imagism, so imagists like Ezra Pound, Hilda Doolittle, Richard Aldington, they all came to surface. And there was also the modernist movement in poetry that included poets such as T.S. Eliot, W.H. Auden, William Butler Yeats. And again, when you find yourself reading poems that help you define the state of the world today, you often find yourself resorting to, I mean, poems are timeless, yes, but because they are a dialogue with the era and the environment around you, you find yourself going to poems that remind you of the state you are in today. Remember, modernism was also the period that gave us symbolism, expressionism, futurism, surrealism, cubism. And we could see a few isms arising right now. They still don't have a name yet, but probably, some of them do, but others don't. But probably in a few years from now, we will remember this period as an era that has specific properties of the poems that came there during that time. So most importantly, what reminds me of modernism is this make it new attitude, the make it new as explained by Ezra Pound. In light of today's mystery, uncertainty, fear, the global crisis that we are in, the phase the world is currently going through is very familiar to the interwar years, so World War I, World War II. And oftentimes what we are going through right now is read in a way as a different type, but a very similar World War. So the pandemic poets of the 2020s, they seem to have sensed what looks like the second wave of modernism. And it's beginning to show its early signs on poets today with an increasing number of, poems that show this attitude for change, this attitude for breaking some authorities, this revolutionary era. It's not just happening in one part of the world, it's happening almost everywhere. So poets are witnessing this shift. And at the same time, this shift is also manifesting in their writing styles and habits and conglomerations as well. So some poems that I wrote that also reminded me of, that were based on other poems that were written during the 1920s or during the period of early modernism are also here in this book. So there's one called 20. It was originally called 2020, and it is my take on William Butler Yeats's 1919. It's on page 59. And just a little note before 2020. Again, this dystopic state that we lived in, it was reminiscent of George Orwell's 1984. So there are some terms like newspeak, doublethink, watch for Big Brother, fake news, toxic propaganda. I mean, all of these, they also seep into our minds because we are also living in this Orwellian world. especially during the first stage of the pandemic, when you feel that, okay, so there's a new normal, there's a new world order, I don't know what's going to happen, there's a lot of uncertainty. And when I wrote this poem, it was before news of the vaccine was certain. It was, you know, people were still saying either there is going to be a vaccine or there is not going to be a vaccine. The World Health Organization was really making up its mind. Do we wear masks? Do we not wear masks? So there was a lot of increasing confusion. 20. With all that doublespeak, you'd think someone just stepped into an Orwellian 1984, but ended up crossing the bridge, regressing to a 1919, where old and new are in torsion, gyrating in and out, in a pas de deux. But the futuristic return to 20 is a jet-lagging oxymoron that can feel like the second coming. As things fall apart, the center cannot hold. 101 light years later, dreams have lost elasticity, making the most modest of them look daring. Yet we can still arise and go now, for the in is free. In it, we can weave visions of a new normal and cook remedies for ramifications. Destruction demands dawning, as night is today, and other analogies. There is an image of Plato's man, round on all sides with the heap of parables and poetics, and furiously whirling cyclonic vortices, like dervishes, spinning to the rapid staccato drum beats. But isn't this how we wash our clothes, stir in the honey, and run around the mulberry bush so early in the morning? And so the sun rises. So for those of you familiar with modernism, you might see allusions to T.S. Eliot as well, and W.B. Yeats. So maybe another poem that speaks to the pandemicized world is a poem called Immunity. Okay, words unmask as parentheses are lifted and expressions spill, untethered out from a demummified mouth and verse like grains of icing sugar, scurrying out of a tiny puncture in a plastic bag, no longer sweet. Counting, people, cases, perhaps cattle-like in herds, numbers. Out of breath in many ways, suffocating on forbidden air and dreams. What are lower cases in a world of capitals? Listen, lulling thoughts and questions which shall remain unanswered until further notice, while we sit back and witness mass contagion with its metabolic side effects of digesting facts, absorbing prejudice and assimilating fear. The truth is held hostage in a game of hide and seek, tucked in some layer among the rubble, until it unravels, yawning awake, stretching in stark nakedness, wondering where we were before pausing that video, freezing time. And as nations starve and die, people conjure the phoenix, living in mythopoesis, preparing, watching, waiting vigilantly for a miracle within the fertile ashes. Resistance builds antibodies to misapprehension and immunity to inscrutability of viral news, tweets, and other toxic narratives that can be altered with the swift inflection of perception. So there was more to the danger of the pandemic than the virus itself, but it was also the fear that it invoked in people through the news and through the way that people dealt with it, especially in narrating. You know, the dystopic, futuristic, the dystopic negative outlook on the future that people had to live through. So when there is so much to fear, to distrust, and to discharge, writing offers solace and a synthesizing, concretizing of certain realities within. It became an exercise for mind and soul. You know, when you are uncertain about something and you don't really know what to listen to, the best person to listen to is yourself. I think art, whatever medium that you choose, is something that helps you understand the world more, because that's the way the world speaks to you, speaks through you. I remember James Joyce, an iconic modernist, of course, specifically in Finnegan's Wake. The image of Shem the penman, if you are familiar with Finnegan's Wake, and he was a squiddish being. He was filled with ink. He produced art in isolation in what Joyce called the stinkinsome inkinstink. So he said that with each word, Shem would not pass away his squid self, and he screened words. So it's like the ink within. So you do see the image of the squid in every writer or in every artist. So ink from within, and this is what we need to bring out for us. So in light of the current situation, the image of this specific character, it was channeled by my inner poet, if you want to say it that way. And there was a lot of reference to ink everywhere, not just in my poems, but I kept remembering the ink and stink of the wake. I also wrote a tribute to this, not to James Joyce, but to the ink and stink in a poem called A Poet in Love that I will also share with you. So, okay, bear with me, sorry. This is a very short poem. Sometimes the squid longs to be embraced, pressed and squeezed, until the flow of ink, as dark as sleepless nights, fills a few hungry pages with the gusto of this exotic delicacy. At first, manufactured in its own body along the cardiac rhythm of iambic pentameter, is a confused mass, an ink and stink of the wake, but well brewed when its love, ink and alchemy, carouse, rising from squid to sacred. Now, I mention alchemy because, again, as a modernist, my area of specialization is Jungian individuation in modernist poetry and literature. And alchemy is a metaphor for the self, a metaphor for the fulfillment of the self. And art, such as poetry, for example, is also an alchemy. So when we perform our artistic endeavors or hobbies, we are, in a way, individuating. And this is not only because it affects us, but the effect of the inner on the material itself, just like the alchemists used to believe, is a very profound experience. I mean, when you start with art, you start up with a mess. You start up with a jumble of words or paint or canvases. You repeat the work, you refine it, you process it up until it's pure. And this, again, is a tribute to writing poetry. So the squid, alchemy, writing poetry, it's all one and the same. It's all getting the ink from within and the gold from within. So, well, how did I deal with certain times during the pandemic? My personal experience of isolation during my ink and stink phase was quite unlike any other that I had experienced before. As I mentioned, there were many positive aspects to this phase. I mean, thank God we were all safe, we were all healthy. We had enough time to reflect, to have some quality family time. That was great. The first 6 months of the pandemic, well, we haven't been out of the house in public for almost a year right now. But the first 6 months especially were very difficult because we couldn't move out of the house, obviously because of the rising cases and the uncertainty. But living in an apartment is, for someone who loves nature, who is moved by nature, is not easy. We weren't allowed to get in the elevators because of, unless it was something very necessary. So we were stuck and trapped in a setting that is perfect for cabin fever, that we fought very well, which again, I'm very thankful for. But it was a very sad time because, we never knew when we would see our family members again, our friends. And then in August, and there was a lot of unrest in my native country in Lebanon, but in August, that was like the cherry on top when the nitrite bomb exploded in Beirut. And it was very difficult for us to envision when we can be there again, or what it must be like right now for the people who are there. So, and again, I mean, it was very confusing. It was very harsh. It was very difficult. I mean, thankfully, right after that, we moved, and we do have some contact with nature right now, and that helps a lot. So, but living in a high-rise building and not being able to even open the window properly because it was an awning window, so you couldn't really slide it open. You needed to push it out, and there was only a limited amount of space that would let in some air and sunlight. So we wanted to see the sky properly, but you know, there was in other times we found it a very beautiful view because there were a lot of skyscrapers. It looked very modern, architectural wonders, whatever. But when you are craving the sun and the moon and being under the sky, that doesn't really help. I remember on June 21st, it was on June 21st, there was an eclipse, and we wanted to see it because everybody else was seeing it, and you know, we felt that it got darker suddenly, but we couldn't really see the sun. So I tried to steal a snapshot of those very few moments in astrohistory that we are going through. I succeeded to a certain extent, and but it wasn't like actually being there and taking a look at it. There were so many celestial phenomena going on. There was the pink moon, and again we had to cheat our way into seeing the beautiful pink moon that is all over the news and people are sending pictures of. So that kind of brought in another poem called Moonlighting. So moonlighting, of course, referring to the moonlight, and at the same time, the term moonlighting, as in, you know, lazing off, not doing much. And I was sitting in front of my laptop, of course, because that was the window to the world. That's where I visit my friends. That's where I see my family. That's where I work. So thank God for technology, which again, my relationship towards changed so much during the pandemic. I'm going to share with you the poem, Moonlighting. I think it's on page 50 something. So, and since it was in June, that was when we were supposed to travel in the summer. And like so many people around the world, that was completely out of the question. And you not only want to just get out, but you literally want to get out. You want to be out somewhere under some sun, some sky. Sometimes I get fed up with the megalomania of confinement, of being where I don't want to be, but there's nothing that time or space can do to limit the vacate in vacations. So I let the inner roar tame the outer lion. The lifelike whirlwind of boredom only sets me freer as I stare into the only source of light, air, and noise I have. A small opening in my awning window. I wish there was a Narnia inside my closet. Must be the lack of coats. There was a full moon, a pink moon, and a ring of fire. I had exactly 5 centimeters to capture a glimpse of my lunar company with my camera. I squint and then cover one of my eyes for a sharper, clearer vision. The glass is goose-bumped, over-embellished with polka dots of acid rain, making an awful see-through. With enough uncertainty and unclarity in the world, I'd rather view the Clair de la Lune through that crack no wider than my small hand. And I look, and I see, and I marvel, overjoyed, at the concave droplet of silver in the vast ebony sky, dotting the eyes of the world. A wide aperture is in the eye of the beholder. I could swear I saw it smiling several times, and heard it whispering silent vespers of peace, something to go with the friendly beam. Heramica silentia luna. Sometimes the only means of travel you have is a train of thought. So I look at my desk and commit metaphors of all types. A book becomes another world, opening like a street musician's accordion, with the sweet tunes on a busy street. Underailed, I take my pen as a rail ticket and doodle my destination on that tiny space left on my groceries list. I glance out another window, my laptop screen, through which, while inhaling my coffee, I finally see the swinging city, greeting me with softy vans, theaters, squares, books, bookshops, and galleries reverberating once more with the heartbeat of a loving giant. Let me just shut my eyes and just be there. Just as a note, I don't really drink coffee except in very rare occasions, so this was one of them. Okay, the book also has lots of mythological images. So I believe that mythology is a normal part of our life, this parallel reality that we live every day. It's something that we need to acknowledge, and it's also something that when we get in touch with, it offers also a healing effect. So there's always room for some extra dose of mythology in life, and poets and artists know that quite well. There's mythology and there's also ekphrasis. So ekphrasis, as many of you know, is the translation of one medium of art in the language of another medium of art. So you would write a poem about a painting, or you would create a musical piece about a poem or about another painting. So I'm going to share with you an ekphrastic poem called Drawers, Slips, and Slits, which before being published in this book was published in the Ekphrastic Review, the journal that is edited by Lorette Luzajic, who I think is with us today. Lorette, are you here? Let me check. Yes.
Yes.
Okay, so Drawers, Slips, and Slits is on the Metamorphic Drawers by Salvador Dali. Okay. Keep them shut, they, or rather I, say. For it is best that Mercury is kept at bay, in a chest of buried treasures, of pleasures, winding down from crown to sacral bone. Sacred in double helix mimesis is a grander form of pregnant drawers with little slips, like a cascading waterfall ending at the hips. In them are tickets to Narnia, Neverland, and Nevermind, to fantasies of the future and abandoned past behind. In another is a muffled moan of frozen bark in the icy wilderness, of neglected dreams and haggardly hopes that still press. So, confess. Another ekphrastic poem that combines ekphrasis with mythos is a poem called Starry Night Theogony. So that is referring to the very well-known Starry Night by Vincent van Gogh. Neurons glower on the velvety darkness of the celestial carpet, sending pulses of rays of light, from light, along the axon of her longest dendrite, a stretched sciatica, Geb's root, Thoth's delight. Meanwhile, Cassiopeia, on her heavenly throne, pays tribute to the dreams of days past, granting, fusing, scattering the bulbs of thought and no thought, through the collective window of the mortal race. Newt stretches out her limbs, wide and tight, also embossing the velvety skin with diamonds. Lapis lazuli softens up its shell and melts profusely, joining in the gem fest of her body. Newt, Nacht, night, nuit, a molten lapis lazuli, a café trottoir, a set of rolling hills, a house with a yellow thatched roof, all awaken with delight, to be tattooed on a canvas of one starry night. This poem was written way before the pandemic, and it combines images of mythological gods such as Re from ancient Egyptian mythology, Newt as well, Geb. There's also Thoth from Norse myth. Okay, so maybe I'll read a couple more poems before we leave the floor for questions.
Yeah.
Okay, so there are two poems that are written not together, but one was written before the other and they kind of blend well. Iconic existence and the icon speaks. So this is about the power of the symbol. Iconic existence. Keep her locked in an eternal smile, that loving gaze you see in your mind's mind cave deep within yourself. Or in the symbol on the solid wooden surface. Let her sing, but from her netherworld into yours. Silence the singing icon to keep it alive. Never conjure the image or form it in this foggy existence. You kill the icon when playing Pygmalion. Strength lies in the centuries-old wood, solitude in solidity, and purity in the hardness within its heart of gold. There's reality in imagination and more life in stillness, one that is beyond the tangible and breathing. Glossolalic, it speaks and echoes from the outback of non-air. When gods materialize, they die, only to be born again. The second one in the series is called The Icon Speaks. Today she arises beyond paint and gold, a sweating, breathing image, not of hard wood, but of solid being, with a voice as soft as the vapor of her fading image, as concrete as her emerging existence, encouraged into this world where she speaks melodies as the other world, that of symbols, dissipates. Clouds precipitate, and from that realm she moves serendipitously into the world of synchronicities. Whatever caused the conjuring or beckoning, there it was, the rapport between two realms, conversing right before my eyes. What have I called, pressed, or summoned, like an accidental portal into the seafloor, deep, right into the lap of a cockleshell? Aphrodite blooms into this reality. So thank you all for being such a patient audience.
Thank you, Doctor. Thank you, Rula. That was lovely, and a really nice array of different samplings from the book. I mean, from different parts of the book, which express different kind of modes in which you're doing poetry there. I think it was fascinating, and I mean that the notion of transformation seems to be central to the way you thematize as well as express yourself in these poems. There's always a sense of individuation, going from one state and so processually arriving somewhere else. So I wanted to open the floor up. Does anyone have any comments or questions they'd like to pose or ask Rula? By the way, everyone, I should say this: I'm losing my hosting virginity today, so I might not be as technically astute as I should be, but I'm going to try. It's my first time. So if anyone has a question, Lorenzo, who's this? Sorry, Lorenzo Caligaris, yes. Would you like to say something, Lorenzo? Or do you want me to read, or should I read it out? Should I? Okay. So Lorenzo says, when listening to the poems, it felt quite focused, but quite a lot of focus was put on the musicality of the poem as a whole. For example, in the poem about the lavender field, I noticed that the V and W sounds were prevalent throughout the poem. When writing, how much consideration do you give to finding a word that sounds right? And how do you find a balance between looking for musicality in a word and its meaning?
Thank you for your question, Lorenzo. Well, actually, it's very important to bear in mind how the poem will sound, because as you know, for example, alliteration, rhyme, there are so many sound devices in a poem that should be there, in my opinion. And this is because poetry is meant to be read, even more than it is meant to be written. Poetry, for me, is a physical act. So again, we go back to the squid image of James Joyce. It comes from within, and it's an expression. It's an expression of what is inside you, made material. So you need a voice box for that. You need breath. You need air. It needs to stick to your mind. It needs to be palatable. So yes, musicality is very important while writing a poem, because a poem is written only to be recited.
Very true. I noticed that myself about your poetry. It's very visceral. When you talk about embodiment, you really do feel the layeredness, the physicality of your realities and the way you use language, the sensuality of it, which is, as you say, essential to its effects. Anyone else got any questions or comments they'd like to make? Please do just send them through, or if you wish, unmute yourself and declare yourself. I can see there's lots of comments here. Tina Kalabaliki says, mesmerized by the use of your words and the way you read them.
Thank you so much, Tina.
Mary Boulos is saying how beautiful and excellent the work is. Of course it is. Anyone else got questions in particular about, perhaps about Rula's writing during the pandemic?
Yeah. Hi, I put a question there in the chat box, but you missed it from me.
I'm sorry, Lulu. I'm sorry.
If you want, I can just ask it.
Please do, yes.
All right. So hi, Rula. Miss you. It's like I was very inspired. I loved the poems as usual, but I can't help but ask: is there? I could feel in a couple of the poems you recited, there's a theme of like the cyclic existence. Am I wrong, or did I get the wrong impression? Yeah,
absolutely.
All right.
Yes, this is the main theme of the poem. Simply being. Being is here forever. So yes, there is a cyclic existence. This is why there's a lot of poems about death and rebirth. There are a lot of poems that invoke images of Adonis, for example, the poppy flowers or the kukiko, images of the phoenix, images of crucifixion and resurrection. There's a lot of allusions also to that. So yes, this is the prevailing theme.
Mariam,
you're not a bad reader, Lulu. Not bad.
Not indeed. Mariam Al-Bastaki, one of our own AUD students and a brilliant poet in her own right, asks, every poet has a singular message that they want to share through maybe all of their work. What would you say is the one thing that all your poetry shares? You know, what I suppose she's asking, what's the essence, the quintessence of your message, your vision, I suppose, yeah?
Well, I think, and I'm saying think because there's not just one. But the most important one, as Lulu suggested, it's yes, the cyclic existence of being, the cyclic nature of life, of all of its forms, and also the different archetypal voices that are within us. So, and the different layers of worlds that exist in our daily lives as well. So there's this existence and there are parallel existences that we live without being that aware of it. So mythology is still prevalent. We still live the way, that we all have our mythic stories, or we all can rewrite our life as myths. We all have the many different experiences and the many different voices within us. So it's not that we have you don't really pin yourself to one set of traits or characteristics. You can be many because being is something grand.
Pamela says, beautiful presentation of your poems, dear Rula, and congratulates you. She also agrees that poetry is at first physical, just like the diverse forms of the arts. Hedi Habra Sabah, I think it's Sabah. Your work is inspiring. One can feel the depth of your need for transcendence and the many ways used to live through different alternate worlds, mythical literature, and also the nurturing food that offers a sort of individuation process.
Thank you, Hedi and Pamela, and thank you so much.
Carol Mora says, very beautiful and eloquent responses, Rula. So grateful for your work. I wanted to ask something. Can I ask something as host?
Of course.
Well, you're talking about parallel worlds. When you do a crisis, like on the Van Gogh and so on, do you really feel, because of the way you think about poetry, the way you're with your Jungian, interests as well, that when you represent a different art form, like a painting by Van Gogh, it isn't really derivative. It's actually on a par because of what you're saying in terms of what you think of expression, and it's being cyclical and so on. Is that true? I mean,
yes, absolutely, it is. And it's not just one. So I could write 10 poems about a Van Gogh painting or anyone else's painting, and they could all be very different. again, it all boils down to the many eyes, to the many voices that we have within us.
Mariam Abastaki again, would you say that your use of nature and flowers add the essence of life being to your poetry? In other words, I suppose, does natural representation, do you find that specifically propulsive?
Yes, yes. To the theme and to poetry as well. So poetry without nature is, I mean, I'm not saying it's not possible, but this is what inspires us innately and naturally.
Indeed. And I suppose, we are ourselves, natural beings. So I think
To
one of
some
the things,
extent.
well, yeah, but one of the things I found about your poetry was that you try and find ways in which, individual and archetype join. So it's almost like nature out there, nature in here are kind of fusing into each other at many
Exactly.
points.
Mhm.
Yeah. Anyone else got any questions they'd like to ask or make a comment? Feel free. Mariam loves your poems, calling them beautiful,
Thank
of
you
course.
so much. And I love your poems too, Mariam. Oh, we have a question from Amira. Hi, Amira.
I can't see it. Where is it? Okay, yes, go for it, Amira. Sorry.
Hi, everybody, and hi, Dr. Rula. First of all, I wanted to congratulate you on publishing your work. I was a student of Dr. Rula. I was in her English 102 class. And I just wanted to tell you that I thought that the poems you chose to read really spoke on the behalf of a lot of people, including myself. So we were all confined to staying at home, obviously because we had to. And I believe that the train of thoughts, that the metaphor you used was actually the only way of traveling. I wasn't able, obviously, to write a lot. I'm not a big writer. I'm a big reader, so I think that I did something very similar to you. I used this time to, I was actually a little grateful for this pandemic because it allowed me to ground myself and put in a lot of effort and time and investment into the things I do. Normally we all rush and try to complete our things right before the deadline. So I think this was a time for us to really, especially for me, to put in a lot of effort into my studies, to concentrate more, and to actually, I'm pretty grateful because I was able to reflect on my thoughts and things I went through on my own. I was able to discover myself more. I was able to reconnect with things that I barely had time for. I used this time to work on myself, to work on, I play an instrument, I play the piano, so I used that to practice more and to learn more. So I actually do agree with you on the fact that this pandemic gave us somewhat of a bright side. And sure, we all went through devastating times and we all lost a lot of people. And but I think that it's good that we use this time for our benefit. And congratulations once again on your work. And I'm very happy for you. And I'm really happy into taking part of your success, even though it's from a distant Zoom call.
Thank you so much, Anita. Thank you for your beautiful words and input. And I'm very happy that you got the chance to reflect as much as you would like during the pandemic. And yeah, I believe everybody is a writer. It's just that we need to do it. While you're at it, while you're reflecting, I would say keep a journal. And you never know where it takes you. So I truly believe that, yes, you can express yourself in that way, because you do already. You did it beautifully just now.
Thank you. And yeah, the one thing I wanted to say is that although it wasn't personal, although the writing wasn't personal, I believe that my writing did improve a lot better. I was able to reflect on a lot of ideas and thoughts in my work as a student, simply because I had more emotions, I had more time, and I had a lot of time to reflect on things I actually wanted to say.
That's
So
wonderful.
thanks for teaching us.
That's wonderful. Thank you. Thank you so much, Amira. That was very nice of you. Thanks.
Thank you, Amira. So Ali Jamil says, thank you for the heartwarming poems during the pandemic. Another sentiment in solidarity during the pandemic, which I think is the theme of today's event, solidarity in a way, I hope. Anyone else got any questions they'd like to ask or make comments? Yes, Lulu, if you want unmute and just deliver it, verbally, if you could.
You are unmuted, Rula, but we can't hear you.
Oh, that's odd. Wait. Let me
You
just-
can't.
Yes.
Ah, there she is. There
Much
she
better.
is. No, you've gone again.
We lost you again.
Okay, let me take off this. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yeah.
All right, it's because of the headphone. All right, so I want to go back to a term you coined, Rula, at the very beginning of your presentation, and I was amazed by it. I was taken by it, the physical distancing.
Yes.
It is true that now we are physically more distant from each other, but we can see it. We cannot help but feel that we're socially more connected, or at least on a professional level, it is much easier to have a meeting, to have a conference, and I can see academics always saying that I've never been to more conferences in my life. You see, so I'm always this is very true that we're physically, even though physically we're more distant from each other now, but maybe on the social level we are, or on the mental level we have the opportunity, by virtue of all this technology, to interact and to synergize with each other. I don't know, I'm asking you, and I'm asking I always ask myself this question: do you think that this will be the nucleus for a new wave of mental process later on to come?
Yes, yes, definitely, and I hope so. But yes, from the look of it, yes, it's so much easier to get together. I mean, in certain, I mean, it depends on the state that you were talking about, but in the context that you just gave, like academics attending conferences and having meetings, yes. When it comes to poetry, definitely. I mean, so many wonderful people that are with us today, I met because Indelible went virtual. Because the open mic nights that we used to have on campus are now just open to the world. I've met so many people that, I mean, forgive me if I forget your names, if I forget to read your names, but I see Hedy, I see Chris, I see Lorette, Susan, so many of you that, you know, we were able to either reunite or meet each other through this. And there's no better way to meet other like-minded people than through the art that brings you together. So yes, I mean,
we had the technology before the pandemic, but we weren't forced to use it. The pandemic forced us to use it, and now we found it very convenient. And
absolutely, it changes our relationship with technology and with science. I mean, how many people were actually willing to take the mRNA vaccine when it first came out? How many clouds of conspiracy and quackery surrounded it, even by medical doctors? So many people doubted it because it was new. It's a technology. It's science. It's something that we fear, and I mean, rightfully so. We cannot just. I mean, we can't say that everyone who doesn't want to be the guinea pig is wrong. No, but at the end of the day, people are taking whatever's available because they want salvage. They want to get out of this mess. They are beginning to trust science. Their relationship with technology is changing. And I think that's a very positive thing. I think this will open the door to many other new discoveries and inventions in the very near future. So Zoom has opened opportunities because, as you said, now we are forced to use it. And we see the practical side of life that we were really missing out on just because we weren't using it the way that we should.
And Glenda, Semino, and Lorette both confirm, Rula, that if it wasn't for the pandemic, you know, well, in Glenda's case, she wouldn't have discovered Indelible, and Lorette is just saying that Indelible has done a wonderful job, especially during the pandemic. So we've got a question here. We've got a question here from Pierre Cardassia. I have a Sapir-Whorf question about flower, lavender, violet, mallow, marshmallow. Yes, 4 flowers and maybe more: lilac, orchid, and plum. For one another, more symbolic and definitely more. Oh wait, I was surprised by the easy association of purple with lavender. I would put purple apart, but I don't know if it is because something linked with my personal history or with my native language.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, yeah, purple is one thing, but lavender is a color of its own. It has its own autonomy. But if you were to put it on a scale among the 7 colors of the spectrum, then it's definitely with the violet ray. So it's kind of a shade of purple, but it's not purple. Yes, I do agree. And I mean, especially as a woman, like even if girls and people who are, you know, artists, people who really care about colors and different shades and things, you can't say pink if something is fuchsia, for example. You can't say yellow if it's a pastel yellow. You need to be more specific. And yes, I mean, I stand corrected here. It's not purple, it's lavender. I used the term purple in order to show what scale it belongs to. But thanks for pointing that out, Pierre.
Yes, do thank you. So in effect, you're making it more accessible by using purple.
In a way, yes.
Yeah. Okay. It was a very interesting question. Actually, my daughter's favorite color is purple. Purple. Anyway.
If I tell my daughter, for example, I mean, get the pink flower, she would look at me and say, "That's not pink. That's fuchsia," or "That's not green. It's teal." And she used the word teal ever since she was, I think, 3. She would tell the different shades. So yes, lavender is not purple.
Moving on. So Anastasia, one of my students, says, "Thank you for your wonderful poems and sharing your experience." Pierre Kardashian says, "Marshmallow is a flower," smiling.
Yes.
Okay. Does anyone else have any questions they'd like to ask or make any comments? What I think about this event so far has been that we are, in a way, always asking new things, but revolving around a center, which is quite interesting. That actually, you know, your ideas are being proven true about the way this event has actually happened itself. Leah N says, "Congrats on the book, Prof. Back in high school, I went through a poetic phase where I always wrote poems and read them to my classroom. Now I've been really interested in art, and I grew to a liking of history. The fact that you combined these together was really great. Thank you for sharing."
Thank you so much, Leah. And I would advise you to go back to that phase because, yes, I mean, writing does happen sometimes in phases and blocks. So many times we tend to stop writing because of so many things, because we get busy, because we just don't feel as inspired, or we just mind other things. But go back to that stage. And I invite you and everybody else to, whenever you write something that you find you would like to share with others on Indelible, please do so. The next call for papers, the call for submissions, it ends on May 1st, and the theme is food and nurture. So whether it's an ode to an onion or, I don't know, some nostalgic memory of your favorite dish or something, or just the theme of nurture in general, please feel free to write about it and submit it. And you also mentioned history, art and history. We have a wonderful session on the 30th by a very huge poet, Anthony Anaxagoru, who will be talking about writing history in poems. So yeah, I just thought I'd let you know, give you a heads up.
Excellent. I don't believe, oh wait, here we go. "Thank you for sharing your work with us, Ahmed Sharafuddin."
Thank you, Ahmed, for being here.
And anyone else got any questions they'd like to ask of Dr. Rula? To do either with the poetry or poetry in relationship to the pandemic, or indeed Jungian concerns, if that's...
Concerns, I like the word.
No, wait, there's one person who's actually waiting to join, so then maybe she'll have a question.
I have a question.
Oh yes, who's that? Oh yes, Glenda, is it?
So,
Hi, Glenda.
hi, how are you doing? Hi, Christine from Ireland and everyone. Happy St. Patrick's Day. I just wanted to mention that we have a group, Belchina, and we were about to go on a retreat together in Ireland when this happened and we couldn't go. So we had a virtual one, and now we've been meeting every month virtually online. And each year, a book is chosen as a as a particular book by the libraries, and we write poetic responses to that book, and then they're published on YouTube. So I'll let you know. We'll be working with Paula Meehan's selected poems, As If by Magic. If you don't know her work, it's really quite wonderful and magical.
Well,
Okay,
thank you so much.
that's
I
all
would
I'm
love
gonna
to get
share.
to know it. Thank you. Thank you,
Thank
Glenda.
Sharing that
Would
with
you
me.
put your cover up on the screen so we can
Right.
see it, or tell us where we a
Sure.
link to it?
Yep, here it is. This is Simply Being.
Lovely.
It's on Amazon and also on chironpublications.com. And the book that came before it, that came out in silence last March, is Jungian Metaphor in Modernist Literature. It's an academic book, and you can rent it on Amazon if you want to read more about the process of poetry and the effect of the idea of Jungian theory and individuation on writing poetry. Then it's found on Amazon as an ebook, as a hard copy. The soft copies aren't out yet. And you could also rent it as an ebook.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Glenda. Ali Jamil says, what is the one piece of advice you would give to someone who wants to start writing poetry?
Okay, well, a very important piece of advice would be to grab the idea the moment it comes to you. You wouldn't want to forget anything. Poetry is all about taking two seemingly unconnected things and merging them together in an image or a metaphor. And life is full of those. It's actually saturated with metaphors. We do them all the time. We commit metaphors, as I always say. Once the metaphor hits you, write it down. Have it somewhere, on your phone, on a notebook. It doesn't matter, but you need to capture those ideas. Just like the photos in your phone, how, sometimes you take pictures of food, you take pictures of something you see on the street. You need to do the same thing, but with the metaphors that hit you or the ideas that come to your mind. And something will come out of them one day. So that's what I do sometimes. See, sometimes the idea hits you when you are in the most bizarre situation. You're either in public or in a meeting, or I don't know. I mean, sometimes most of the ideas they come to me when I'm half asleep. So there's really some awkward times that you think of things or that you make these associations, and you really want to keep them and not lose them. It doesn't always work that you sit down and you write a poem because you want to. No, sometimes it comes to you, and before you lose it, just make sure that you grab it.
Great. Huda Yunus, beautiful inspirational poems, Rula. Congratulations again on your book. Indeed, the pandemic has ignited the passion to write more and express ourselves as human beings. Simply Being, as you said, love the title. True. I myself was a bit busy with work life, and the pandemic was a refreshing space to get back on track, and it was amazing to get in touch and meet poets and fellow passionate writers online. Ahmed Sharafuddin, I felt a
Thank you,
sense...
Huda. Thank you so much. And I'm really happy to see you again via this platform as well. Huda was a student of mine, I don't know how many years ago, like a lot. Let's say around 15, 16 years ago. And I'm really happy to reconnect through poetry. You were always a wonderful writer. Thank you, Huda.
Ahmed Sharafuddin says he felt a sense of a positive message in your poetry, at least from your writing during the pandemic. Let me do a few others. Christine Murray, I wonder if our experience of color has intensified during this pandemic. We have little exposure to visual art, and winter here lacks in intensity of color. And finally, Amira, if Rula, if you'd like to talk about all of them at once, says, I think poetry can be very reflective on personal emotions. Did you find it easier to write poetry during this pandemic as opposed to other times where it may possibly be that we are less emotional?
Okay, so I'll start with Ahmed's question, the positive message. Yes. I mean, I wouldn't write something in order to make me angrier than what I am feeling at a certain time. So I know that sometimes intense emotions such as sadness, grief, anger, they all drive us to write. It's good, but the thing is, you don't want to amplify those feelings. This is why I sense that you always need to add a positive tone, at least towards the end of the poem, keep revisiting it until it's positive. So sometimes it's like a discharge, it's like a venting, but don't keep it that way. I don't like to keep angry poems. You know, again, alchemy, we need to change it. We need to bring out the gold in it. And the second question, Chris, you ask if the experience of color has intensified during the pandemic. Yes, by all means, at least from my experience, I'm craving color all the time. When we moved to a different house and, you know, I just want to be outside all the time. It's like I miss the blueness of the sky. I miss the green grass. I miss everything that has color. The bougainvillea flowers, the pink ones, the red ones, the orange ones. Yeah, there is a need for brightness. There is a need for hope, and color gives us all that. And Amira, did I find it easier to write poetry during this pandemic? I don't know if it was easier. I just, you know, as I told you, I felt that it gave me the go. So I was like, listen, you have to do this. Do it as a practice. Do it as something that makes you feel better. And I write every day. I mean, I would scribble. I would capture metaphors, as I said earlier. It's just that putting it in this crystallized form and finally taking the decision that, okay, this needs to be done. It did come during the pandemic, yes. I don't know if it's because we have more time or because it gave us more time to think about what are the important things that we should be doing that we weren't really paying attention to before. Our lives are still busy, but I mean, let's face it, being at home is not like, you know, 2 hours a day on the road or, so you know what I mean? You always want to feel protected. So you always feel that you are sheltered. You are washing your hands, wearing your mask, staying at home, whatever. And this all adds up to a more heightened sense of reflection. I wouldn't say it was easier during the pandemic. I would just say that it was more environmentally friendly to write a poem. So yeah, and we definitely were not less emotional before. I mean, anger is an emotion, frustration is an emotion, all that, and we, you know, the busier our lives are, the more we feel them. So no, I wouldn't say the pandemic changed anything with regards to, I mean, there are new emotions that we experienced, but that doesn't mean we were less emotional before that.
Well, I think it's not, oh, here we go. Thank you, says Amira. She appreciates your reply. I think it's now 1 hour and 15 in. Does anyone else have any comments or questions they would like to ask? And if not, I'm waiting to see if anyone has. If not, I would like us all just to thank Dr. Roula-Maria Dib for a wonderful, wonderful session. And a really, really interesting Q&A as well. I think it was almost equal time of Q&A with the actual reading and talk. So that was great. So I think we'll wrap it up there. And thank you, Rula, so much. And also thank you, Rula. Thank you, Rula, for the whole festival. I mean,
Thank you so much.
We're all here because of you. So thanks, and thank you everyone for attending and for contributing and making this such an interesting and eye-opening event, everyone.
Thank you all so much. And I would also like to invite you to tomorrow's session, which will be an open mic where so many wonderful poets will be reading. Many highlights are here. So we have Hedi Habra, we have Chris Murray, we have Lorette Lizajic, we have Susan Porterfield. And forgive me if I didn't read everybody's name, but there will be a wonderful 1 hour and a half reading of poems tomorrow. And of course, Dr. Omar Sabah. So I hope that you would join us. The festival is still on for the next, so that's the first week. We still have 2 other weeks. And we hope to see you there. So thank you so much. Ahmad, you were a wonderful host. We should do this more often, you know? You can take over a few sessions.
I know how to admit people and stuff. It's great. No, really,
Wonderful.
It was a pleasure. It was a pleasure, Rula. Thank you very much for
Thank
the event.
Thank you all for being here. And See you very soon.
Bye-bye, everyone. Thank you for coming.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.